Welcome to Expressions of Leadership. I'm your host, Michele Kawamoto Perry. In every episode, we explore how people from educators and artists to executives and entrepreneurs lead with authenticity, rise through adversity, and share the wisdom they've gained along the way. Some leaders build companies, others build industries. My guest today, Kara Demirjian Huss, has done both. And she's not done yet. Kara is founder and president of DCC Marketing, a nationally recognized women-owned agency specializing in clean energy branding, strategic communications, and public-private partnerships. She's also senior vice president of TCCi Manufacturing, a global leader in electric vehicle compressor technology, and president of DemirCo Properties. Named a top executive to watch in 2025 by Chicago Business Journal, Kara has helped shape national clean energy and sustainability policy, spearheaded multi-million-dollar revitalization projects, and built workforce development programs that are redefining the pipeline for the next generation of clean energy leaders. Kara, welcome to Expressions of Leadership. It's great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Michele. I'm very excited.
Now, Kara, you began in fashion at the University of Illinois, then pivoted into your father's newly acquired company. How did that unexpected move shape your leadership journey?
I think it's always a great question. You know, I love fashion. It's still a big part of my life. It's a big part of my brand and who I am. But it truly did shape my life. I started in the fashion industry. I worked under an incredible mentor, Ed Bacharach, who really opened up doors for me in terms of a learning experience. I mean, I think when you come out of college, you're there to learn. And, you know, I didn't know anything or really have a ton of experience. And to be able to do so much in the short time I was under his leadership, learning about distribution networks, learning about how to buy product and place it in different locations based on audience, based on geographic regions, based on styles and influence. Those are really key traits that I took away from that and still use today. But, you know, my dad came calling about 2.5 years after I started in the fashion industry. And as you mentioned, that's manufacturing, and that's a huge leap. I'm not an engineer. The thought of going into the manufacturing industry just didn't seem even relevant in, you know, where I had set out from a very early age, knowing I wanted to go into fashion. But I think one thing for sure was that family is incredibly important to me and building a legacy. And I was really so proud of what my dad had created. And so there was excitement around this opportunity to work underneath him. I think he was very supportive of, you know, even the short amount of time of what I had learned. He was getting ready to launch 2 new products in 2 of the companies that we had at the time. And he was really looking for somebody to help set up distribution networks, to help really understand new product markets. So although it was manufacturing, a lot of the framework of what I had learned in the fashion industry was going to play a big role in what I was about to undertake in the manufacturing. So that was pretty exciting for me. So that's really how that transition happened. So I took a leap of faith, and I really was so proud of my dad and what he built. And so my brother was already in the business. So this was just a really opportunity to build a legacy and a generational business. And so that was really, really the impetus of me making that move. And I will say, many people say sometimes you don't follow your path and it opens new doors. I would say this was something that really, you know, I am so thankful I made that leap of faith to move over and start working in our family business at the time.
And at just 27, you took on a $20 million downtown revitalization project with no real estate background.
Right.
What did that experience teach you about leadership, risk, and learning on the job?
Yeah, I think that was another pivotal time for me. I feel like I learned very early that, sometimes you have to build the plane while you're flying it. And that is a big part of also being a leader, is learning how to do that. So at whatever age, I do always encourage people to raise your hand, step outside of your boundaries of what you think you can do, and really give yourself an opportunity to grow. Because even if you fail, as long as you're learning, that opportunity helps you create these experiences and build your journey for success. And so that was a big part of it. But when I was 27 years old, my brother, my dad retired and my brother was asked to take over the family business. And my dad had negotiated a deal with the city of Decatur, Illinois, where we live, to help revitalize our downtown. And this was a big undertaking. It was basically taking an entire blighted block of our downtown, the core of our community, and revitalizing it, pushing $8 a square foot gross rents to $12 a square foot triple net, unheard of in a community of our size of about 120,000 people. There were a lot of disbelievers, and a lot of disbelievers that a 27-year-old could do it, and even disbelief in at times in myself. I knew nothing about that industry, but my dad decided to retire. My brother took over the business, and there was a hole in the ground. And I raised my hand and, took the leap of faith that this was something exciting and something new. Again, learning back from that experience of going from fashion to manufacturing and doing something that was outside of my comfort zone, and really having to roll up my sleeves and learning something new. This gave me another opportunity to do that again. And I think one thing I found was that I was shaped by one of the most important pillars that I lead in my life, and that's in leadership, and that's the value of public-private partnerships. And learning that economic development is more than just building a building. It's about building these partnerships, understanding and evaluating the community that you're in, building narratives and positioning around the audiences that I'm trying to recruit, tenants and recruit national retailers. All things, again, that have shaped the journey of where I am today and the businesses that I'm in. There were a lot of doubters out there for sure, but I do think, looking back, what I relied on heavily was the action that spoke volumes. I was able to get that building 80% leased before it was even finished building. And that spoke volumes to people who disbelieved that could be done. And again, I think that was from understanding there was a big need and wanting to invest in the community and taking that risk. There were so many mentors that I leaned on at that time. I didn't do that myself. And the way I learned, Michele, was through reaching out and building relationships, learning from the veteran real estate developers in town, learning from the real estate and residential industries, because that was an important part that companies, especially from a retail standpoint, because we were building a mixed use, wanted to know: what are rooftops? Where are they? What's your average household income? What kind of quality of life assets do you have? How many businesses are there? What's your industry makeup? Is there more than one business? When I recruited Talbots at the time into Decatur, these were questions that were being thrown at me, and I had to lean in on my mentors to help me learn that industry, just like I did at Bacharach when I started there, and just like I did at our family businesses when I started there. I had a lot of mentors teaching, and me doing a lot of listening and learning.
And as you said, you faced a lot of skepticism from those who thought you were too young on the project, or maybe too ambitious.
Yeah.
How did you push through the resistance, and how did you overcome your own self-doubt?
I think those are all really good questions. I think I still, you still have this little person on your shoulder that a lot of self-talk. I tell young people all the time, confidence, you have to build your own confidence. And, I think you have to have confidence in yourself, and you have to believe in yourself. And that's the first step. Again, I had really good mentors around me. So although there were doubters and there was skepticism about the project itself, I think almost more so than skepticism around whether Kara could do it or not, but just skepticism around the fact that this was just not a smart investment. And I proved that wrong. And I proved that, if you really do your research and you really build on a team that can help you navigate the challenges that you're facing, you'll be surprised at what you can achieve. And I have very much a GSD mentality. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on podcasts, but it's very much this get stuff done mentality, right? Putting the right people together, putting an action plan and getting it done, moving something forward. And I think that was a big part of really facing that skepticism head on. Is I wanted to get this project had to get done. My dad had already pledged it. Like, we had to do it. That investment had to happen. So all the skepticism around me, I had to tune that out and really focus in on what I needed to get done and build the people into my team to help me get that done. And so that's really how I approach everything I do and help, build confidence and kind of reduce skepticism as I put a good team of people around me and I ask a lot of questions.
And I'm hearing that partnerships and mentorship has been really central to your story.
Yes.
How did you decide that these were two areas that were going to be key to your leadership?
Oh, I think that started at an early age. And I think my dad always, he always saw that in me. My dad is 92 now, and he still tells me, he's like, you are an incredible relationship and connector. And he said that has taken you so far in life. It's, I take the time to really listen and understand the perspectives of what other people have. I always use the Stephen Covey, begin with the end in mind. If we approach a situation or a challenge or a problem with first understanding what the perspectives are from those that are there and evaluate what gaps there are, it really helps us when we think about building partnerships and trusted partnerships that are authentic. And so I approach my relationships like that, both in work and personal. I think people are very important to me, and I don't contact them just because I have something I need. I really work to foster that Rolodex into more than a Rolodex. I foster that into a relationship. And I think that's what, I try to tell the younger generation this as well, is that your relationships that you build, you need to continue to keep those. I ran Mom's Weekend at Homecoming at the University of Illinois. The people that helped me put that together, some of the key business leaders in that, at the University of Illinois, I'm still friends with, dating back to those days. When I was in New York City working in the fashion industry, those relationships that I had there, I still have those connections today. And even in the real estate and in the development, I just add to those. And then I help be a connector with others, because I think as you grow through this journey of relationships, it's not only about who you're connected with, but that ecosystem that you can bring in to create a really powerful team of people around you. And I value that so much in everything I do. And it makes me able to move faster. I can activate quickly because I have these resources. I gave a commencement speech at Millikan University, and I focused around one of my favorite game shows, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? And if you remember that show, you've got 3 phone calls to phone a friend when you need help. And I use that philosophy, reach out to your network. You should be able to have 3 people at a quick call when you don't know something and you need to either make a connection, learn something, ask questions. Like, you have to have that in your life. It is so critical as you're building your business and growing your journey for your own success in any position you're in, really.
And can you give an example of when having those connections helped you to move even faster?
Oh yeah, I mean, there most recently, I've been working over the last 4 years on bringing to market our TCCi manufacturing clean innovation hub, and it was one phone call that I almost didn't make. So to think of all the things between 2021 and now that may not have happened if I hadn't made that one phone call, really is quite overwhelming for me to even think about. I was trying to navigate and understand how can I convert my 1940s facility here to look at rebuilding it and converting it into an electric compressor production facility. And to do that, the costs were astronomical. We were facing tariffs, we were facing COVID, we were facing logistics and supply chain nightmares, and we needed to look at U.S. operations, but our product wouldn't have been competitive if we would have had done this investment on our own. And so that one phone call that I made to a previous senator of ours who became the deputy governor, just to simply ask some questions. Like, here's what I'm trying to navigate. Here are some of the challenges I'm facing. I see what's happening at a federal level with the investments in clean energy and conversions of manufacturing facilities. I see the investment the state is, starting to make around electrification and clean energy. What path or what resources are there out there for me as I think about that conversion of our facility here in Decatur, Illinois. And that one call led to the introduction and meetings that really changed everything in my life. It opened doors. It helped me even build my narratives better. It helped me understand policy and where I can influence and impact policy to help others. It helped me really build a new network in a new market altogether and how to do that quickly and more effectively. It got me invited to major events like trade missions. I've gone on 3 trade missions with the governor that opened up more connections for me across the C-suite network in Illinois. There's just so many things that I think that from one relationship or one partnership can lead to other opportunities. And that's just one example of how that really was a catapult for so much in my life.
Well, we're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we'll dive into how Kara turned a cost center into a multi-million-dollar business. Stay with us. We'd love for you to be a part of the Expressions of Leadership community. Follow us wherever you get your podcasts and connect with us on Instagram and YouTube at Expressions of Leadership. Welcome back to Expressions of Leadership. I'm your host, Michele Kawamoto Perry, here with Kara Demirjian Huss. And we're about to explore how a strategic leap into business became the launchpad for extraordinary growth. DCC Marketing began as an internal cost center. How did you realize it could become a full-service agency with national reach?
Yeah, I think turning a cost center into a business was really the start of me wearing many hats. I I believe that, it's a phrase that people chuckle today about, like, gosh, yes, there's Kara. She's got like 17 hats on. How does she do or manage all of those? At the time, just going back to the real estate and the project that I was developing in 1997, 98. I was also running the marketing for two of our divisions at the time. And so, as you can imagine, those in itself were two really difficult businesses to run and lead for the organization. And I knew I couldn't do it all. And so at that point, I really thought, okay, I'm going to need some help here. Particularly on the marketing side, I'm running, large budgets in our companies that I was working for at the time and needed support. And so I sought out a few advertising agencies from our region here and quickly hired and fired, to be honest with you, several, because it became very clear to me that they were just selling ads or logos and not understanding the business that we did, the audience that we were trying to reach, the products and services that we offered. And it seemed like a gap over and over again for me as I met with agencies. And that gap, like many businesses, you start a business because you see a gap or you're trying to solve a problem. That's really how DCC became born, was because I saw a gap in the market of really leading with business, leading with a business strategy and a business mindset, and really trying to roll up your sleeves and understand the company. What are their business goals? What are they trying to achieve? Who are their customers? What does the competitor landscape look like? Where are their value propositions lying? Not only what is their audience, but segment those. What do those look like? What are the demographic, geographic, psychographic makeups of those audiences? What types of messaging do we need to build, or, strategies do we need to build in order to then reach those audiences? There are questions you need to ask when you go in to work with a company. And I wasn't getting those questions asked to me, so I wasn't sure how they were going to help me market. So I said, I got to believe there's other companies having these same issues. So I started to do some research between 98 and 2000, just really like, is anyone else having these issues? Are there, companies out there? We have, pretty large Fortune 100 companies, in our region. And I found this same kind of feeling from others. And so I felt there was a need and a gap out there to have a marketing company that really took to you as an extension to your team, that really dove in to understand your products and your services. And then we helped develop that extension to their team so they could do more with less. And so I started to draft a business plan around that. And that is really how it was birthed. I hired in Catherine Smith as my business partner at the time because I was still doing other things. So I knew I was going to have someone that was also dedicated to this. I pitched this idea into my brother because I was turning this cost center out of my real estate division that I was running. But I knew if I built this, it could also not only serve as a bigger marketing department for our own businesses that would be clients of this agency I was going to start, but also serve these many needs of these other companies within and around the area. And so I also had a very trusted network already. So through the time of building and developing that project downtown and becoming very active in the community, I had a very strong network. And so those two things combined really helped build that foundation for me for building that business. And so it was easier. It wasn't easy, but easier to pick up the phone and, call a contact and say, I'm starting a new business. Here's what we're doing. Can I, get 30 minutes of your time? If nothing else, to just, am I on the right track? Are these services that you think you might need now or in the future? So my approach, and we continue to grow over the years, and until still to this day, that's the foundational purpose and vision of our business.
You mentioned growing, and you
Yeah.
were growing from 3.5 million to 12 million, and now aiming for 30 million.
Yes.
And that, of course, requires scaling both
Yes.
vision and infrastructure.
Yeah.
From a leadership perspective, what were the most important levers that you pulled?
For me, scaling isn't just about the growth of revenue. It still goes back to this foundation that I built around, leading with the business strategy. I think of it as 4 Ps for me. The people are the most important. So the team I have around me, I mean, the team I have, many of them have been, my 2 main leaders here have been with me for 20 of the 25 years. The majority of my team is 7+ years with it. Culture and people are critical to me. And so that is a big part of that leadership perspective for me. The other parts of my P's are, platforms. And as we think about today and tomorrow, as I've grown and scaled, I've always had to look at different products and different platforms that I have within my organization. I constantly have to be innovating. Our widget is time. But I don't want to be a lawyer, right? I don't want to be clocking my time and charging you for that. But it was critical that as I started to grow, I had a process and a platform in place for managing time, understanding billables, being able to be accountable to my clients so that they knew what they were paying for. And so making sure through those scalable times, I've always had that at the forefront, the products and the processes in place. And today that becomes even, I wouldn't say more challenging, but there's so many more technology platforms out there. And so we have an entire team dedicated to technology and profitability. So again, it's not about revenue growth. At the end of the day, as you scale, we have to think about profitability and how do we do that in a way, because we've had some pretty aggressive growth, and especially over the last 5 years. And so how do I do that in a way that I'm managing my growth, but yet building my people and my talent and using productivity products and platforms to help me to gain that. So I think those are a big piece of it. I think the last thing I would add is most recently, I think aiming for 30 million, I clearly last year really locked myself in a room and put a much stronger vision plan together of where I needed to go and how I was going to get there and what that roadmap looked like, and realized I couldn't continue to have a founder's mentality. I've been reading a lot of blogs and a lot of articles on a founder's mentality versus like as you grow, more of a CEO executive mentality, and how are those different and how do I let go? Because as a founder, I'm scrappy. I want to be in the work, but I need to start to learn to teach and train and get out of the work, but still make sure that that work is getting done in the frame of reference, in the frame of mind that I started it as a founder, and that vision, is distributed through the company. I brought on a really great leader who's a friend of mine who I've known for over 4 years, who came from the manufacturing industry, not the advertising industry, but had the skills I wanted and had the experience in scaling. And he has done for me more in 6 months just as a leader for myself than I could ever have imagined. And so I think as I set myself up for scaling for that next, I'm really thinking about it in such a multi-tiered way of how I grow the business, how I keep my people and my original foundational strategies intact while I'm doing that.
And speaking of getting away from the founder's mentality and moving into the CEO mentality, how did you learn to trust your team and delegate while still maintaining your standards?
Yeah, I think those are all really good questions, and they're still learning experiences for me as I start to get out of that. I think it goes back to a lot of processes in place. The two of my leaders who have been here for 20 years that I mentioned, I've really charged and empowered them. I've created a leadership team. I've given each of my leaders an accountability area that ties back to my vision. And that's been really important because I think that gives them a sense of understanding of who owns what, and it empowers them to really take my vision into action. And so the reason that's important with the question you asked is because one of my leaders, who I would call my operations, she's my senior vice president, she really leads our operations. And that role of hers includes training and processes. And I think in order for me to really get out of the way of myself, I have to feel good that those processes and those people underneath, both existing in the company now and those coming in the future, are trained the way we want them to be trained. That we have very clear training programs. We have ladder programs for growth. The expectations are clear of what we expect out of each role and individuals. And I think that helps people really do more within the organization when they understand what it is their role is, and where the vision is of the company. And so I think building transparency, building training programs, and building those mechanisms help me feel less anxiety over letting go. I become more of a coach and a mentor.
Well, of course, growth is rarely a straight path. And
Yeah.
Kara knows what it's like to face on a full-on crisis. After the break, we'll talk about rebuilding from near collapse and leading through uncertainty. Don't go anywhere. By partnering with Expressions of Leadership, you'll reach an audience of professionals passionate about leadership and growth. For sponsorship opportunities, please contact us at letstalk@expressionsofleadership.com. This is Expressions of Leadership. I'm Michele Kawamoto Perry, talking with Kara Demirjian Huss about the grit, resilience, and strategy it takes to pull off a business turnaround. When DCC was taken over and nearly dismantled, you had to decide whether to shut it down or rebuild. What tipped the scales toward rebuilding?
Well, after I sat back and really thought about, my options, it was devastating for me. It's really hard to talk about, to be honest, because who would think, and we talk about this with my leadership team who's been here so long, who would think that, it takes you 15 years to build a company and a year to ruin it. Like, wrong leadership makes a big difference. So first of all, I think my first priority was thinking about making a list of, failure, and remembering from my dad that failure is just an opportunity to learn and to never give up. I mean, this is in our legacy document for our family businesses. Never give up. Never give up. Always learn from your experiences, and always build trusted relationships with integrity. And I think that was really important for me because one of the reasons it collapsed is because the individual that was leading the company that I had brought in when I went off to go help my brother really grow our main manufacturing company, when he asked me to spend a little bit more time in that business specifically, which is where my senior vice president of TCCi manufacturing happened in 2015. So 2015 was when I brought this individual in. And so from 2015 to 2016, I spent my time rolling up my sleeves, really learning that business that I hadn't been in as deeply more. Because if I'm going to lead global marketing and really change the face of who we are as an organization, I better learn it. Again, another scary task ahead of me. But so I turned away from the company for a little bit, and I didn't have the foundation at the time. That was very clear, which is why it's so important. What the question you asked me previously about scaling, I got to make sure I have those foundational processes and those training mechanisms. So when I step away, I have trusted people in place, and that I can do that and breathe, again. And so I do think that, it was really difficult for me. It taught me that if I am going to really focus in on building this company, I had to have the people I trusted with me. I had to have the ability to play offense when everything else was shrinking. And I had to really understand that the relationships that had been built had been broken, and that the distrust that had been created through that individual's presence representing the company was pretty significant for me. And so, but my reputation was still an important piece of who the company was. And so I really went out and met one-on-one with all my clients and really started to rebuild that trust, acknowledge my shortcomings there, and really start to build a new plan to take us further, faster, in a new direction. And so it was just a huge learning experience. I feel like it's a show in itself.
And in just 2 years, you went from
Yeah.
1.5 million and bleeding cash to 10 million. What were your top priorities in that turnaround?
I had to get my stuff together. Really, I had to really, I had to go back to focus on the company, on DCC. I had to, put my head down and really restructure the organization, really look at what our priority goals were in terms of our business strategies and what was the core, going back to that core foundation of what I had built when I started the company, and really start to think about what is it that I want to be and do in the future, and what is it that makes us as an organization? What is our value proposition? I went back in and asked myself a lot of the same questions that I ask a client when I go in. And so that was really a big part of it for me. I reorganized as a WBE, as a women business entity. I took a focus in on key sectors that I felt very passionate, that fit within the scope of what we were trying to do as an organization, as we think of building systems of influence, changing behaviors, building networks. I think those are the types of companies that we started to want to go after. So whether that's the educational system, the clean energy industry, the transportation industry, really working more with state agencies and building our business in a new way.
Kara, you wear multiple leadership hats: DCC Marketing, TCCi Manufacturing, DemirCo Properties, all in very different sectors. How do you adapt your leadership style across these different industries?
I think everything has come to an intersection for me. My journey has been not necessarily intentional all the way, but I think lately I'm starting to see all the pieces coming together. I believe that my leadership style, it actually translates across all of these industries and sectors that I'm in. It's really about being accountable, having good integrity, building good teams, and building an understanding for the businesses that we're doing work for and with. So what I mean by that is whether it's DCC Marketing and we have clients in varying industries, and I'm trying to understand and evaluate that trend, those industries. What are we trying to transform? I'm evaluating those audiences and developing narratives and stories and systems of stakeholders and influencers that can shift mindsets and behaviors. So whether that's the work we're doing for the Department of Transportation around impaired driving or distracted driving, or public health around the 988 mental health, or whether that's around, the change to decarbonization. The approach I'm taking is the same to how I'm leading, though, in that industry is very similar to how I lead at TCCi. I'm really diving in and understanding the global marketplace, understanding what our competition is, what the market trends are happening, what policies are influencing decisions at a global scale, whether that's in China or India or the US. How are electric vehicles impacted? How are refrigerations impacted? How does that impact the entire thermal management system? My leadership starts with really research and data-driven information. And I think that's, if I had to boil it down to it, I was taught very early from my very first boss to get your ducks in a row, get your information, ask the questions. And I think if I were to say I've been successful, I think it's because I take the time to do that and really learn and understand those perspectives. I did the same thing in real estate. I had to understand Decatur and the community and what was important about Decatur before I could go sell a building in downtown. I got to get them to Decatur first. So I had to do a lot of learning and a lot of question asking. And so I became accountable for that research data-driven piece, and that informs everything we do and everything I do as a leader.
We're going to take a brief pause, and when we come back, we'll talk about Clean Energy Innovation Hub and the industry partnerships she's helping to shape. True transformation starts from within. The Forward Project partners with organizations to create meaningful culture shifts and develop leaders who inspire real change. If your team is ready to move forward with purpose, visit www.theforwardproject.co. You're listening to Expressions of Leadership. I'm Michele Kawamoto Perry, and I'm joined by guest Kara Demirjian Huss, and we're about to explore her big picture work in clean energy and beyond. Kara, you've been instrumental in securing major funding for clean energy projects, including Illinois' first Reimagining Energy and Vehicles Incentive Program Award. How did the Clean Energy Innovation Hub come to life?
It goes back to, really understanding and evaluating the industry and where we were at TCCi as an organization. We were early in knowing that our OEM customers, our customers like the Trayton Group, Scania, MAN, Volkswagen Truck and Bus, they were particularly in Europe moving forward because of the new regulations happening in vehicles. And so my brother Richard, who is absolutely incredible, one of the most amazing mentors that I have, I couldn't be more honored and proud to be working alongside of him. He's done an incredible job of innovating and growing the business. And one of the things he did early on back in 2018 was see this coming. He's very much a visionary and an activator. So he saw this coming. He saw the needs, that problem. Again, I go back to that. There was a problem in the marketplace, and we knew that vehicles were going to be changing, and we knew we needed to start innovating around those products because application engineering is a big part of who we are as a value proposition for our company. We brought in some key people to help us develop that product line. And then we opened our manufacturing for our electric compressors at our China facility. And, that quickly continued to grow. And when we started to be faced with COVID and tariff situations and things of that nature, we were looking at where are we going to continue to grow that product and where are we going to have a dual sourcing? Because with COVID, our customers were requiring dual places for manufacturing. And our facility here is a 1940s facility filled with asbestos. The cost it would have been to tear this facility down and rebuild it would have made us have a non-competitive product. There was no way we could do that here in the US and make it work financially. And I didn't want this plant in our local community where we all grew up and my dad had invested in jobs and growing the future to close. And that really goes back to that, to my brother saying, hey, if I can look at getting us funding to help us with the conversion of this facility, would you invest in the United States? And his comment was, well, if you can get that done, we sure will look at it. And so that was where my first phone call came to Deputy Governor Menard at the time, was to kind of lay out the situation like I did here that we were facing. And that started to, and some of the incentive programs that the state currently had didn't fit with what the needs were in this new industry, in this new transition to electrification. They had an EDGE tax credit program that just didn't fit in terms of the requirements around that. And so I worked with them to kind of define some of the areas that were problematic within the current incentive program that really framed the new REV program for him and for the governor's office. And so I worked pretty closely over a year period to really rethink how that incentive program was built, not just for me, but for the future of other companies in recruiting, going back to my economic development of bringing business and being an engine in Illinois for that clean energy sector. And so fast forward, we were able to develop what became the REV incentive program, and TCCi invested $20 million, a matching grant with our partners at Richland Community College, the city of Decatur, and the state of Illinois. They matched with a $20 million. So we had then launched this $45 million project to really launch the Clean Energy Innovation Hub with the REV Act and Rebuild Illinois grant programs. So it became a really instrumental project as the first REV and really the first rethinking how we look at our entire ecosystem, because not only were we then the first electric compressor production facility in the United States of this size, we were also building a climatic center for innovation and research within our facility to really change the way electric vehicles are tested in extreme conditions like -30 to +30, solar, wind, and how the electric vehicles perform, because our products are a main part of that thermal management system that impact performance and battery life. And so to have that humongous research center, I mean, it's a 60-foot by 25-foot, we can get a full semi-truck in our facility. And then this third piece we developed with the state as part of this clean energy hub and this public-private partnership was we had workforce issues. Again, we did a lot of research going into this, and we worked really closely with them to see the green jobs of tomorrow. We were lacking computer science, AI. You think about electric vehicles, you think about quantum and AI and everything that's happening. There's a huge gap in that workforce need for the future. So we built a new workforce platform. We put the Workforce Academy, the Richland Community College, inside of our manufacturing facility with 3 classrooms and immersive access to build programs in associates in engineering science degrees. And then I traveled across the state and helped Richland build articulation agreements with many of the universities so kids could matriculate directly from the community college into a 4-year degree without any transfer credit issues. And we could get them into the fields faster. And so that really then got me involved in the workforce system in Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
It was a 2-year labor of love working on the REV and this entire incentive program. I learned a lot. I got my poli-sci degree on the ground, people say.
And you navigated complex relationships between government, business, community stakeholders.
Yeah.
How did you lead when all of those interests don't necessarily align?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I'm going to circle back again because we have to begin with the end in mind. We have to understand what the needs are in the industry, what the needs are of government, what's the need of academia, what's our need, not just our need at TCCi, but what's the industry's need? What are our customers and our supply chain needs? And if we all go into this collaborative effort with those, those perspectives in place, I think we navigate challenges in a much more effective way when we're understanding and evaluating the needs around us. And so it started with a need and a gap that I had, but it quickly grew into understanding what the needs of the governor's office and what they were trying to achieve with some critical sector strategy, what they had identified as workforce gaps. It quickly led to the community college and me understanding, what does our workforce training programs look like? What does our K through 12 pipeline look like? What are some of the relationships that we have with the universities and where are those gaps and what are their needs? And then meeting with the University of Illinois and Northern Illinois University to really understand it from a university perspective and how we're moving research and technology through, as well as student pipelines. Looking at Argonne National Lab, we brought them into the circle. How does that fit in and what they're doing as an asset to us in Illinois? And how do we integrate them in? What problems are they trying to shape? So it became less about me building an electric compressor facility and more about, wow, this is like a major movement that we could have, and we could be a leader in that, not only to benefit ourselves, but benefit the industry, the state, our stakeholders, our communities. And that gets me super excited. Like, sign me up for that all day long.
We're going to take one final break. When we come back, we'll dive into Kara's vision for the future, the legacy she wants to leave, and some advice worth passing on. Don't miss a thing. Follow Expressions of Leadership on your favorite podcast app and connect with us on Instagram and YouTube at Expressions of Leadership. We're back on Expressions of Leadership. I'm your host, Michele Kawamoto Perry, and my special guest today is Kara Demirjian Huss. Kara, what's your vision for the future? Not just for your companies, but for the industries that you serve.
I definitely hope my vision outlives me. I hope I'm making a lasting impact on the people that I come in contact with. I hope that I'm a mentor to my family, to my children, to the people I work with and work, side by side with. I hope we can make a difference in a variety of ways in the industries that we're serving. I love what I do because I really like to learn and understand the variety of different businesses that I get and I'm fortunate to be working with. And every time I learn something new, it opens an opportunity for me to give back and share that knowledge with others. And so I hope that is a legacy that I leave. I have a G2 underneath me in our in my marketing business, and we are a G3 business on the manufacturing side. And I think building our legacy as a business, both philanthropically as well as intentional growth, is really important to us when we think about what do we want out of all of this that we do while we have the fortune to be on Earth.
And when you think about the arc of your career, what legacy do you personally want to leave behind?
I hope people think of me as somebody that, truly cared, that was a mover, that really was able to bring people together and create some actionable change, whether that's change in their lives, whether that's change in their business, whether that's change in their community, whether that's change in their family. I really hope that that resonates with what, the work I do.
Well, before we get to our last segment, which is our wisdom and whimsy segment, what's the best way for our listeners to learn more about you and your work?
I think the best way is on my website for DCC Marketing, which is dccmarketing.com. Also on our manufacturing site, TCCimfg.com. There's several podcasts I've done. So between those two websites, there's a host of different assets that you can access.
Well, now it's time for our wisdom and whimsy segment of the show, where we get to ask our guest one advice question and one fun question. Let's start with some wisdom. What's one underrated quality you think more leaders should embrace and why?
I've said this already, but building partnerships, like really building them. I'm not just saying get a business card from somebody when you go to an event, but build that partnership, foster that relationship. Don't leave somewhere without following up, not just because you want business, but because you care about what that individual is doing and trying to achieve. Think about that relationship more than a sale or something that they can do for you. What can you do for them? Lead with that in your heart and in your intent, and everything else will follow.
And now for the whimsy. You've led multi-million dollar projects, as we've discussed, and global initiatives. But if you could take a year off to do something completely different, what would it be and why?
Okay, I definitely have to say I've thought about this before. Okay, so I love espresso. I love espresso martinis. I would definitely be interested in being a barista. Or owning a tiki hut, or just bartending at a tiki hut. Although all my friends tell me very clearly that the minute you go do that, you're going to want to change the processes and start running the place. So my form of relaxation may not last very long there.
Kara, thank you for joining us and for sharing your journey from rebuilding a company on the brink to shaping the future of clean energy, to showing us that leadership is as much about relationships as it is about strategy. We appreciate you being here on Expressions of Leadership.
Thank you so much for having me.
And to our listeners, I hope that you're walking away inspired to take that leap, start that conversation, or say yes to a challenge in front of you. If you enjoyed today's episode, follow Expressions of Leadership wherever you get your podcasts, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and share it with someone who could use a boost of courage and vision. Until next time, keep leading with intention, courage, and heart. If you haven't done so already, make sure to click on that follow button so you don't miss out on future episodes. Have a guest you'd like us to interview? Questions, ideas, or just want to say hello? You can reach us at letstalk@expressionsofleadership.com or connect with us on Instagram or YouTube. We'd love to hear from you. And as always, thanks to our amazing team behind the scenes for making this podcast possible, including our sound engineer, Graham Palmer, and my chief encourager and advisor, Jeremiah Higgins.